Right, now we can talk to Joseph Lombard, who's Professor of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University. He's here on set with me. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about the prevalence, or so it would appear, of this far right, this white supremacist ideology, and whether you think that perhaps the authorities have neglected it in preference of pursuing those that they suspect of being radicalised and being Islamic.
Well, unfortunately, authorities have done far more than just neglect it. They've actually tried to downplay it and ignore it. We've had the recent comments from Donald Trump and others whom you just referred to try to say that this is actually not a problem. But then we look at the manifesto of the shooter and of other shooters before him who clearly are invoking ethno-nationalist ideologies as justifications, as the motivations for their acts.
And where does this idea of white genocide come from, this idea of this replacement theory that the main suspect in this particular instance, but others as well, where they're propagating this idea that the white race is about to be extinguished?
You know, in all honesty, this is an idea that goes back very far. We see it in the early 20th century, we see it before that. And really, in many ways, the question is, why are particular individuals radicalized by this ideology? How do they get radicalized, and what can we do to counter that?
Indeed, a lot's been said about the role of social media, of course, in the propagation of this this hate-filled ideology. But what about the role played by national and international leaders? He directly references Donald Trump as being a new leader to maybe offer salvation to the white race. There's also Viktor Orban and others, Viktor Orban in Hungary, others who are also promulgating this kind of war talk. They're almost trying to suggest that there is a war between Western culture and Islam.
Yes, and you've even had people like Representative Stephen King directly refer to this replacement theory, which we could really, in a sense, call almost their replacement theology, because it's the theology of the white nationalist, white supremacist movement, that we must defend ourselves against these people who are coming to take over. And I represent the deepest threat of all, which is a white person who has embraced Islam. And this is something that, unfortunately, it is now spreading because, in a sense, with the election of Donald Trump and other officials, we've turned over a rock and we've seen what was underneath it. And he's allowing this to spread further and further. People feel justified in saying this, whereas before they felt that there was some check.
It's also in Europe as well, the rise of populism, the rise of identitarianism, as it's rather clumsily called.
Yes.
This is a real phenomenon which is affecting the whole continent, isn't it? Brexit, it's argued, is part of that very same trend.
Yes, Brexit, Geert Wilders. There are many others. I mean, we go back to the Norwegian massacre. This is all over that manifesto. This is a problem that threatens everyone because we see, for example, the synagogue in Pittsburgh. Jews were killed. We see the church in North Carolina, that it was Black Americans who were killed. And then we look at the temple in Wisconsin, Oak Tree, Wisconsin, that it's Sikhs that were killed. This is a threat to everyone.
So everyone who is another.
Everyone who is another, and unfortunately, it's a threat to white people as well.
Absolutely. So what role, then, what responsibility needs to be taken by the leadership of the Western world?
Well, for one thing, I think in many ways it starts with the media. The media needs to take some responsibility and look at the difference in the way that this is covered. If there is a terrorist attack by a Muslim, studies have shown it receives 7 times as much coverage as a terrorist attack by a white supremacist. That's uneven coverage. You look at the Daily Mail today, and we have a beautiful blonde boy. Where did he go wrong? Whereas we see with the Orlando shooting, this horrible Muslim terrorist who represents
Absolutely.
ISIS in America.
And language matters, doesn't it? I mentioned again Donald Trump using the language of war. He's talking about the Central Americans posing a threat, an existential threat to the United States. It's an invasion, he says. I mean, this is invoking a warlike mentality, isn't it?
Oh, yes, and it's the whole basis of his being elected, is all of these people who see that they feel like there is an invasion and that he will be their leader against it. But he's the exact opposite of a leader. The Prime Minister of New Zealand is a leader. This is a person who steps up in the middle of strife. Donald Trump has proven himself to be somebody who falls to the occasion rather than rises.
You referenced the role of the media as well. A lot, as I mentioned before, has been made of the fact that the social networks now are instantaneous, that this man, this perpetrator, was able to stream live the atrocity. I think for about 17 minutes it was up on Facebook. What role, then, should the big tech companies that are so responsible for our interconnected lives today, what role should they play? And are they able to harness the technology in order to stop that kind of thing being shown?
Well, I can say that given the amount of posts that they've been able to delete from Muslims who treat, for example, in favor of Palestinian causes and things along these lines, it looks like they do have that ability, but that they too fall into the trap of the media in policing anything that they see as potentially going towards extremism on the Muslim side, but letting go of those things which seem to support ethno-nationalist movements on the other.
But it sounds very much as though the leadership needs to come from the politicians.
The leadership needs to come from politicians.
West.
It needs to come from the media. It needs to come from those who supervise social media there, and it needs to come from academics as well.
Joseph Lombard, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.